I provide care for the elderly in their home. All right. I do everything from checking your mail to feeding your dog, feeding your cat, getting you dressed, getting you showered. And you said you had pizza for dinner, right? Uh-huh. Preparing your breakfast, lunch, or dinner. Whatever you ask is pretty much what I could probably do.
Taking care of old people isn't glamorous, but it's one of the fastest growing jobs in the United States, where the population is aging and young people don't want to or can't afford to look after their parents.
Okay, have a good night. All right, bye.
The problem is it's still almost impossible to make a decent living doing this work. In Georgia, home healthcare workers like Jasmine Okaheri are the largest group of domestic workers, but they only make, on average, about $21,000 a year.
What you're getting paid, that's probably only enough to pay your rent. You still have your other utility bills, you have to get food in your house, so we're still barely making ends meet.
Jasmine doesn't have health or retirement benefits, or get vacation or sick days, and home care workers are handicapped in any effort to fight for better workplace conditions. The 1935 National Labor Relations Act, which allows workers to collectively bargain, specifically excludes domestic workers. A handful of states have found workarounds, but in the vast majority of the country, domestic workers still don't have the legal right to unionize. Until earlier this year, Jasmine thought there was no way to fight the system.
Good morning, everyone. I am Jasmine Okaheri. I am a new member. I just joined, I believe, February of this year.
Jasmine is now a member of the National Domestic Workers Alliance, an advocacy group that's trying to fill the void by organizing workers to stand up for themselves. 2 years ago, they helped secure workers access to overtime pay and the federal minimum wage. Tamika Middleton is the group's only full-time staff member in Atlanta.
Welcome to our first organizing intensive.
Do you think of yourselves as a union of sorts?
Yes, I would say we are doing that similar work, but we don't have the ability to develop a collective bargaining agreement. We don't have the same access to employers that a union might have. So we're trying to figure that out and trying to play that role in a state that is very difficult to move a lot of labor-friendly things, worker-friendly pieces of legislation.
On the most fundamental level, getting things moving means gathering as many domestic workers as possible. And that, as it turns out, is hard.
Domestic work differs so much from the traditional labor force in that there's not a work site that you can go to and meet many workers. You have to figure out how to find those people.
How do you find them if they're hidden?
We go to a neighborhood and knock doors. Are you a domestic worker? Do you know a domestic worker? And then we just canvass neighborhoods. So we will go and give out flyers to everyone, tell everyone about the work that we're doing.
Does it make your work difficult that all these people don't necessarily want to talk to you or to anybody?
Definitely. Often we'll get people who are not responsive because they're anxious or they're nervous about doing anything that might make them lose their job or might offend their employer. And so we are always trying to tread really carefully. But what we want them to do is to know that they have access to a network so that they're at least being treated fairly in their jobs.
So far, they've only managed to recruit about 400 domestic workers, or less than 1% of all those in the state. But their focus is on gaining influence over the long term.
What the domestic workers face is kind of a triple whammy, as African American, as women, and as working class people.
Georgia Senator Vincent Fort is one of the few legislators fighting for domestic workers. Earlier this year, he introduced a bill that would not only raise the minimum wage in Georgia from $5.15 to $15 an hour, but would explicitly include domestic workers for the first time.
The domestic worker movement over the years has had an even more difficult fight to fight than wage workers that have been included under minimum wage laws.
If someone came to you and said, you can have the $15 minimum wage increase, but we can't include domestic workers.
I tell them to go to hell. I tell them to go to hell. I could not morally, in good conscience, allow a bill to be under my name without domestic workers in it.
Given the political climate in Georgia, one of the least labor-friendly states in the country, Fort's bill is a long shot. It's also opposed by most of the businesses that actually employ domestic workers. The workers aren't paid by the clients they take care of. They're paid by agencies, essentially matchmaking services that pair them together.
There are over 1,000 home care agencies in Atlanta, and all of them are very competitive as far as what they charge.
Agencies charge patients upwards of $20 an hour, but only pay workers about half that. They say very little of that difference is profit. Most of it goes towards taxes, insurance, and administrative costs.
What would it mean for the industry if a bill like the one that proposes a $15 minimum wage passes?
Agencies would have to raise their rate to stay in business. The alternative of simply paying them more per hour sounds great, except that the family is the one that has to pay it. And so the number of families who can afford to absorb that is a fairly small number. I know, and I have been around a lot, hundreds of home care workers. Yes, all of them would certainly be glad to make more money, but I don't hear a systemic complaint that they're not making enough money.
Everybody who's on board for 15 as a base wage for domestic workers in Georgia, let me see you raise your hand. Yes.
Tamika and the NDWA have heard the exact opposite from the workers they're in contact with. And they're convinced those they haven't spoken with likely feel the same. They just need to keep finding and organizing them.
I think we have some work to do. We have a lot of work to do.
When you say you have a lot of work to do, you mean like it's going to take months, it's going to take years? I mean, how far away?
The entire journey that we're on is definitely like a multi-year journey.